Hello and welcome back to the live series brought to you by Amicus Recruitment. This is the podcast that gives you insight into the life and role of tech leaders from all over the world. And today I'm joined by the lovely Hema Ramaswamy, Senior VP of Engineering over at Tracer. Hi Hema, thank you for coming on. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me.
That's all right. It's a pleasure. I know we've had a couple of conversations up to now, and they've all been really interesting. So I'm pretty excited to get stuck in. So let's just dive straight in. And in terms of what you're doing now, what kind of, I know when we've spoken before a little bit, we've kind of gone into what sort of drew you into this kind of profession. So do you want to maybe just for people listening that weren't obviously in our conversations elsewhere, what did draw you to this kind of career for you personally?
Yeah, this goes back to a little bit of my upbringing. I grew up in South India, and from the very young age, I was exposed to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, both academically as well as professionals and practitioners around me. So naturally, there was a draw towards that. And I also come from a culture where, we were encouraged, women especially were encouraged for education and, reaching for the stars. What I'm good at, what makes me happy before landing in software systems engineering. And the little bit of figuring out is basically, I typically start with a why. So people these days call it being curious. And then I get into, what can we do? And again, these days we call it bias for action. And the how part is what makes me happy. So I figured out that my strengths are, I'm very methodical, detail oriented, and I persevere with the problem till I solve it really well. So those are all characteristic traits that drew me to how I landed here.
Yeah, so in terms of what your managerial style looks like in that case, I know like again when we've spoken before, you can already tell even if you haven't spoken to someone like you before that you do have a people first kind of approach. You've got a very warm sort of persona about you. So what to you, what does a people first approach look like when it comes to managerial styles?
Yeah, if I had to summarize, I would broadly say two main things. One is you play to the strengths of people. And the second one is to invest in the growth of the person and the people. So when I say play to the strengths, it's just natural that people have strengths and playing to that and aligning and placing them in projects and initiatives that has benefits from their strengths will naturally bring business impact, right? Without much friction and without much trying. And the second one is invest in their personal growth. I don't know too many people who don't want to grow, right? They're always wanting to learn, grow. So as a leader, providing a nurturing, low stress and safe environment to practice those personal growth skills. Are the two things that I would say is people first approach. And as leaders and organizations, you build policies and things to happen. Do you have any questions around the specifics?
I love that. I love how you're saying how kind of you don't know anybody who doesn't want to grow, like you don't know anybody who doesn't want to develop, and it's such a simple idea that as a leader that is your job to tap into that. So I really like that kind of outlook on that. How do you really get to know your team then in that case?
This is where it my approach is, I would say, a little different. There are many ways you get to know the team, right, over the course of time. But the primary ways that has worked for me is spending one-on-one. So always have one-on-one with your team members, working on projects together, and team events where you put that extra effort and intention to know them as a person first. Of course, they have the skill set to, provide benefit to the business, but the goal here is to get to know them as a person.
Yeah. I love that. I'm really digging deep into what kind of makes your team tick and things like that as well. So
yeah.
You're working on a remote basis at the moment, right? So what does onboarding look like for you, especially as someone who takes such pride in getting to know somebody in your team and diving into their character? How is that when you're working remote, and what does remote onboarding look like?
Yeah, certainly COVID has given us all a taste of what remote workforce looks like. Personally, I come from larger corporations, HP, Oracle, where we have been doing remote work for, several decades, right? Even in the early 90s, we were kind of remote to the Bay Area. I live in Austin, Texas. So at Tracer, at least, all the onboarding that we have done post 2022 has been remote. Primarily, what we have done is a two-step approach. The first step is to, and both these steps have dedicated coordinators. That's number one. You make it somebody's, responsibility to onboard new hires. So the first step is, getting them assimilated to the company, making sure that they have the equipment that they need, the accounts that they need, benefits information, meeting various teams, and all of those things. So that typically is like a week or two. And the second step is where, you really pair them up with a buddy with a new hire for however long the new hire needs, right? So they show them the day-to-day work, and they are with them every step of the way to help them succeed, at least, till they get the first project done and things like that. So that has worked for us. And, getting them involved in various team activities. They have team lunches, team games and other things that each team does their own little thing. And that all helps them, onboard and assimilate pretty well into the team.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. I know a lot of people kind of approach remote onboard in different ways, and a lot of them kind of do meet up now and then. Some of them never meet. I was in a role before this one where I never met any of my colleagues the whole time, and so it does vary, doesn't it? And but it sounds like you guys are nailing it over there. So you've got your team, you know all about your team. You've got people remotely onboarded really well and integrated. But with this situation, how do you then build trust within that team as well?
I'm just going to say what it means to build trust from my perspective. I guess everybody has their own way of building trust, and what their definitions are. For me, I think just being authentic, just who you are, and the good, bad, and how people perceive you is your authentic, right? And the second one is walk your talk. And the third one I would say is you have to demonstrate by action that you care. And the last one is important, right? Because you can't just say, you have to, your actions should speak for itself, and that you care. So I think these three things is how I have attempted to build trust.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what people would want to see in a manager, isn't it? Someone that doesn't just talk the talk, someone that practices what they preach, somebody that's hands-on with you, and someone that really comes down to your level. Because at the end of the day, being a manager, I guess, is all about being approachable, and that's kind of what builds trust as well, isn't it? And bringing yourself down, like you said, to kind of walk the walk with your team as well. That's a really, really good, it's a really good point. So in terms of working with your team, how do you kind of encourage your team to develop themselves, either as individuals or within the team as well?
Yeah. Over the years, I've been part of organizations who have, done personal development different ways. What I currently do is basically I create a department-wide personal growth initiative where it is mandatory for every employee to write down what their personal growth is for the upcoming year, and also write down how their managers can help them. So this is the first step, right? You make it mandatory, and it gives every individual a little bit of time to think about, what they want to grow. Because when you have to write down, you just don't write down without thinking, right? So that's the first step. And the second one is, we work with our operations and our, executive leadership team, and we have provided allowance for the team to use for personal growth. And as managers, we are accountable and responsible for creating opportunities or creating second aspect of it. The last one is very important. Personal growth, as we call it, is personal, right? So it is the individual who's accountable for their personal growth. We can provide, initiatives, programs, and environment. End of the day, it's the individual's responsibility to be responsible and accountable for their personal growth. From our side, what we do is, when we check on project status and other things from a business perspective, we also make it mandatory to check in with them on how they have done on their personal growth. This is part of the 360 reviews and things like that. So we make them accountable, and then they have another chance to think about, okay, what have I done to grow, right? And, you just have to keep doing this, giving them many chances and opportunities. Eventually, it just becomes a habit for them.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. I think one of the ways that I can't remember who said it, but somebody recently said to me that employment is almost like a relationship, and if you want to grow, it's a two-way street. It kind of, you rely on management to check in, but you also need to have that motivation yourself. And like you said, you got to keep yourself accountable for your own development, your own growth. But it sounds like you're providing your team with the platform to be able to, with those check-ins and keeping that value really there, which kind of brings me nicely onto my sort of next question of how you help your team, or how do you make each individual in your team feel valued?
Well, you just recognize and celebrate small wins. It's as simple as that.
I love that. I love that.
So, yeah.
How do you celebrate those? How do you celebrate those small wins? Is it like a pat on the back, or is it, do you get together, or is it?
Yes, that's a great question. These celebrating smaller wins comes from many different ways, right? One, we do have what's called a kudos channel in our Slack, and we recognize people for, going above and beyond, doing more than what you expected, helping somebody. So we publicly have, people recognize that. So that's one way. Second way that we do is I personally have a engineering all hands every 2 weeks, and during that time we don't only celebrate larger project success, but we also celebrate smaller wins, intermediate milestones. They've completed testing, such and such person fixed a problem that has improved the productivity of 30 other people and things like that. So those are small celebrations. And then managers and peers, they call out their team members for smaller wins. And we also have bigger celebrations. We recently had a summer accomplishment celebration. We had released many features with high quality, so we had a celebration for that, a company-wide celebration. So celebrating is good.
Nice. Yeah, it is important to celebrate kind of the small wins, the big wins, and everything in between, isn't it? I think it sounds like a really lovely culture that you've got going on over there, to be honest. So I just want to come back to something that we kind of mentioned right at the beginning of the episode, because I know, like I said, when we've spoken, you just do get that really lovely warm sense from you. And you obviously strike me as somebody, even what you've said, it's kind of obvious that you are a leader who loves getting to know the individuals in your team. You really love to kind of break through that kind of work face barrier and really want to get to know the person in your team beyond just their professional career. So how do people's you must have like a pretty good insight and perception of how people's individual characteristics affect their approach to work and affect their kind of processes at work. Do you want to just maybe tell me a little bit about that, if that's what you're feeling?
Yeah. This is where it's not a science. It's more about intuition. It's more about who you are and things like that. So I'm just going to share, my approach and my philosophy. This goes a little bit into philosophy also, your leadership philosophy as a person, and things like that. So my belief is people bring a big part of who they are outside of work to work, whether we want to admit it or not. That's how I see it, and I believe. So when you're building a team, any insight that you can get into the person they are outside, this is not really, being intrusive or into their private lives or anything like that. Their hobbies, their interests, what they stand for, their background, gender, whether they're part of the LGBTQ community, are they social community leaders? Are they passionate about social causes? All of these little things will help you build a diverse and balanced team. Diversity and balanced team go hand in hand in my experience and also in my opinion. So you just get to know who they are outside. For example, people who are from the performing arts, right? You tend to find them to be detail oriented, right? And they're tuned into the little nuances because that's what they have to do. They need to know to keep up with the rhythm. If they're a dancer, they need to know to keep up with the notes. If they're musicians and things like that. So, and they also recognize the importance of practice, learning, right? So you just get better with practice. So they bring that to work, whether you like it or not. It's who they are. Similarly, people who are involved in community activities, social causes and things like that. Typically women, folks who had to shoulder a lot of responsibility taking care of their family tend to know how to influence without authority because that's what they've got to practice, right? Community leaders is a volunteer organization, right? You can't use your authority to get work done there. So at work, they tend to collaborate a lot. They tend to pick up unglamorous yet important work. They try to they tend to tie loose ends, and you find them a little selfless, right? A little bit more generous with their time. So you just pay attention to people, and you will know the kind of person they are and what they bring and how they can, make your business better. Their diverse background, their thought process, all of that plays a big part. I mean, I can go on and on, but this is where, this is how I have used people-centric approach.
Yeah, no, it's 100% why I asked, because you can tell that it's something that you're really passionate about, and it's great that you've got a lot to say about it, because I think it's something that maybe isn't touched on enough, because it seems like an obvious thing to want to get to know your individual teams and things, but it's another thing to just take it past small talk in the office and really understand and use almost to your team's benefit someone's individual traits and their interests outside of work, like you said, dancing or music or something that really adds to their actual daily life, and getting to know the whole scope of the person really can benefit you to understand your whole team. Do you think something like that affects kind of the productivity behind a team? Do you think that it can add to kind of the results that you would get from a team, or can you read into an individual's characteristics and figure out how they will get how they're going to contribute to the results of a project, for example?
Yeah, this goes back to your question earlier, what people first approach, right? Very key responsibility of the leaders, not at the senior or executive leadership, but also, line managers and, tech leads and others as well, that you play to your strengths, you align the business work towards strengths, make sure you place people in the right environment for them to succeed. That's number one. Second, it's also the leader's responsibility to build a balanced team, which is complementing to each other, whether it's skill set, whether it's experience, whether it's personality traits. So that way, everybody is appreciative of a complementing skill that a team member brings, and innately that environment is set to be a little cohesive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, I love that play to people's strengths. Kind of, it comes back to that whole thing of pay attention to your team on a personal level, not just a professional level, because then you can really get the most out of your team and the individuals within it. I feel like you said, we really could go on about this subject, because I think it is really interesting, and it's definitely beneficial to our audience as well. But I have just got one last question for you. And that is what sort of advice, obviously you're VP, you've got an amazing career up to now and a wealth of experience. So what advice would you have for tech professionals looking to be where you are today?
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier. So focus on the strengths of your people and invest in their growth. That will yield you a very motivated workforce, and your business will automatically benefit from a motivated and engaged workforce. That's what I want to say.
No, that's perfect. I mean, who wouldn't want to know how to keep your team engaged? I feel like this episode's definitely something that people can benefit from when it comes to something like that. So I've just got to do a little bit of spiel now. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can hover over the logo in the corner. I think it's there, or it might be that side actually. I'm not too sure, but it's there. It's on one of the sides. And you can hover over that logo and hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and TikTok for updates at Amicus Jobs. And then you can head over to our website at amicusjobs.com for tech news, webinars, blogs. Keep up to date with our latest Python, Golang, JavaScript roles all over the globe. Hema, thank you so much again. I'd love to have you back at some point to just continue to talk about these things that you're so passionate about. You've got a lot to say and it's super interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the podcast with you, Heather.
Absolute pleasure.